Women's running. Women's running stories.
Hi, I'm Tiffany Gayle Chenault. I am a sociologist, so that means I'm kind of academic. I also run. I run a lot, and I live in Boston. And there's so much more I can say, but that's overall of kind of who I am and what I do. So combining sociology and running. Yeah, we'll leave it there.
Well, we'll leave it there for the moment so I can jump in and say hi and welcome to another episode of Women's Running Stories. I am Cherie Louise Turner. I am your host and producer. And I want to make note here that the music that you are hearing is from Cormac O'Regan. He makes all the original music for this show and he scores every single episode. And we are so happy that you're here. If you are a return listener, thank you for being here again. And if you're new, thank you for joining us and welcome. In each episode, we focus on one woman's running story and we dive into the ways that running is about so much more than running. We get into how running impacts us and also how we impact the running world. And for Tiffany, both of these things are true. Running has changed her life, and in turn, she's making change in the running world. And I'm going to let her tell you how all that happened. But before that, I want to clarify a couple things. First, Tiffany mentions the BAA in her story. This is the Boston Athletic Association, and they are best known for putting on the Boston Marathon, although they do a lot more in the running world, especially in the Boston area. I also want to make sure that you're clear on Tiffany's field of study, sociology, which she also teaches. She is a professor of sociology at Salem State University. But she explained to me that a lot of people don't always totally understand what exactly she and her colleagues focus on. So I'm going to have her jump in and explain it.
Basically, what we do as a sociologist is study society. So it's looking at how we as individuals, our culture impacts like social structure and how social structure impacts us. My particular area of focus in sociology is looking at communities and this intersection of race, gender, and class. So basically I study people and culture.
All right, now on to Tiffany's story, which begins a little before Tiffany found her love of running in her late 30s. Tiffany's whole story is told in her own voice. Here's Tiffany Gayle Chenault.
Running, why run? I never thought about running. I just thought it was stupid. Like, why are you running? Why are you running? It's hot. And running to me always seemed like such like a white space. And so, right, there's this difference of when I think of track and field, I think about, Black athletes and track and field people who do that. But in terms of long distance running, I mean, that was not even in my purview, not in my world, not in my space. And I never thought about it, gave it any consideration. So I come from that place of like, why run? And it's not a space that I belong in. And it wasn't until when my mother had passed away from cancer and I was 37 that I came into running, but only because a friend had asked me. And so just to kind of go back a bit, when you think about like grieving and especially, having this big loss, I was always a kind of social butterfly, kind of party girl. And so even though you go through this loss and you're, depressed and go through these emotions, I thought I couldn't grieve. So part of it is this stereotype of stigma of being the strong Black woman, right? You take care of everyone else. You can't show vulnerability. You can't show emotions. And so I just kept going. Like I didn't even grieve and I just kept functioning. And so to keep up this persona of still being this social butterfly person, like I would just say yes, because in my head at the time, if I said no, then someone would think something was wrong, which yes, I lost my mother. Something was wrong, but I was just like, no, I'm just gonna, just keep going as is. And I always equate this to being like a functional alcoholic, right? Like you're in it and you don't realize like you're not in a right headspace, but you just keep functioning. So I just kept functioning. I was functionally dysfunctional. And so, part of that, a friend of mine asked me to join at the Boston Seaport. It was the Harpoon 5 miler. And normally, if I was in right mind, I would say, no, hell no. But the fact that she asked, and I was in this grieving state of being functionally dysfunctional, I said, sure, yeah, sure. Not knowing anything about running culture, running spaces, of like, how do you even do this? And so I trained, and I'm air quoting, you can't see, I'm air quoting, trained of like, I just walked a bit. I may have, I didn't even run a mile. Like I didn't run. I was just, I'm going to walk. I'm doing this thing. I don't know what I'm getting myself into. And when the day came for this race, again, keep in mind, I've never run like ever, just to see, I think there's over like 5,000 people, and it was a big scene. I'm like, oh my God, like why am I here? And I thought about like, I should leave. I'm like, I can't leave, but I should leave. I'm like, I mean, it was scary and overwhelming. I'm like, I should not be in this space. I should not be in this space. And I'm like, and I have a picture of me. I have my bib number. It's like right underneath my neck. Oh, it was a hot mess. And so I'm like, I guess I got to stay because I told her I would do this. And so the countdown of like, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and the like gun kind of went off and people flew. And I literally was like, hot damn. And I started running. And at some point there was this huge hill. And then as I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this. Because I was determined, like, I got to keep going. And at some point, like I felt something, and I always tell people, I don't know if it was like adrenaline or endorphins, but I actually like felt. And so going back to my mother passing away, my mom passed away in 2011, and this race was 2013. So it had been 2 years. And I guess I was numb, right? You don't realize that, again, you're just numb and functioning in the world. And I actually felt something. I felt alive in that moment. And that was an emotion that I hadn't felt since my mom had passed. And I'm like, huh. And I equate this to like the weight of grief was on my spirit. It was on my soul. And so in that moment, something moved, something shifted. And so I finished. And I'm just like, I did this thing. So this started the journey. So it was from that point when I kind of felt a little something. I was like, that I started in my own neighborhood. That was kind of like the catalyst, really. So in my own neighborhood, I started to just run, no trainer, not knowing anything, and just kind of run in my neighborhood. And that allowed me to grieve. Like that was my time, like all like the grief that I kept to myself. Like I would run in the morning, and that was my time to kind of like cry or talk to my mom or listen to music. That was my space, and that was my outlet. And then from that, it led to like looking around my space. This is where the sociologist kind of comes in. So I'm looking around my space, and I'm wondering, where are the other Black women who run? Right? Like I know like it's not just me. I'm not the only one. And I'm noticing like I didn't see anyone in my space who looked like me who ran. And so I would run in different neighborhoods, just, change of scenery. And again, my background is understanding like community and place, and I'm just always curious. So I would run in different neighborhoods and see a lot of people running, a lot of nice white folks running, but wouldn't see any Black women or Black men or other folks of color. So this kind of got me thinking and got me like my curiosity of like, because Boston is this international running city, Boston Marathon, but yet, where is the diversity in this running space? And so this kind of led to the progression of understanding, well, do Black women run? Where are they? Has there been research on it? And I started looking at like academic and kind of pop culture literature of like, has anyone studied this or talked about this? And surprisingly, there was an absence of this, like in pop culture literature, in academic literature of like people who study running, look at running and all facets of it. And I'm like, oh. And so a lot of the times when people talk about or research running and running in women, it's always women, it's always white women. And I was like, huh. Or even when they do talk about or look at race and running, it's usually Black men, are more specifically, let's say, African men, right? And so this is where the intersection of race and gender come in. And I'm like, I'm questioning this. I was getting more curious and I was running more. I started to do some 5Ks and some 10Ks just because I liked how I felt when I ran. Like I felt strong and it was just healing for me. And so I was just thinking, like, what is the experience of Black women who run? Like just that simple question of like, I'm curious. And I don't think I can get enough information in this space because New England overall, right? It's a white space and we can't, deny that. And then I thought, well, if I did more marathons or half marathons, maybe I could find this out. And so it kind of evolved into this, well, if no one's doing this, I should do this. And I should probably run a half marathon every state because then I'll get more information and maybe network with other women who run and just kind of ask that question. And so that's how that evolved. So kind of a timeline, because again, it wasn't like a quick overnight, like, oh, this is what I'm going to do. So from 2011, Mom passed, 2013 was my first race. And then from there, 2015 is when I started this running half marathon journey. And I thought I was like, this is so original. Oh my gosh, I'm so innovative. No one's done this. I'm so special. And as I'm learning about, racing and running, it's not unique because there are groups, which I later found out, who run like a half marathon or even a marathon in every state. Like this wasn't original. I'm like, oh. But what makes my journey original is just having this academic lens of looking at things a little differently in the running space and asking kind of different questions as I run. When I started, I didn't know what I was doing. I was like, when I tell people this story of I'm just going to do this thing, take some notes, and we'll see what happens. I didn't have a set plan. I didn't have a set, I'm going to talk to these women. I'm going to, do this thing. I'm just going to go and see what's out there and just take it from there. So the first 7 states I did was all of New England and upstate New York. So you can drive everywhere. It's quick and easy. And it's what I thought, right? Predominantly white spaces, white races. Saw a couple of African-American folks, took some notes, talked to them, like, fine. Like, this is what I thought. And I tell people it all changed when I hit New Jersey. So it was my state number 8, and it was the Trenton Double Cross Half Marathon. And in that race, it was about 2,000 people participated in that race. And in that race, there were 600 Black women runners. And I just want to emphasize that again. Like 600 Black women who were running in this race. And I lost my shit. But that was, for me, that was the moment of like, oh, okay, I get it now. And before this, I thought of myself as I'm someone who's researching running. I'm not a runner. And so I did a marathon. I did the Flying Pig Marathon in 2015. And that's when I'm like, okay, it's time to put my thoughts into action. And that started the 50-state journey. But I didn't consider myself a runner. So it wasn't until state 8 in New Jersey, and I saw these women. And these women looked like me, but yet they were different than me. They were all different body shapes and sizes and skin tones of brown and different hair textures and styles. I'm like, oh my gosh. Again, coming from New England, I'm like, I was so very happy. And I kept like talking to all of them, at least as many people as I could, of just like, what's your story and what's your name and where you're from? And all the women, like their journeys were all so very different. What led them to running from, used to run track when they were younger, but now they're older and the body can't take it. So they're doing, recreational long distance running to there are other Black women in my situation who had gone through some kind of loss, some kind of grief, and they found running as an outlet. Other women, for health reasons, so doctors, like if you don't, lose weight, you're going to have to be on, medicines for, diabetes or for high blood pressure. And they're like, oh, no, 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 no. To just like my experience, someone had asked like, hey, you want to come run with me? And they're like, all right, or just seeing other Black women run, they're like, ooh, I want to do that. So it's just like the whole spectrum, even women who were in the military, which is interesting, and they wanted to keep up like running after being in the military. So I mean, I'm like, wow, just all the things. And these women had flown in or driven in to run this race. So they weren't all from New Jersey. I mean, they were from like New York and Maryland. A bunch of women had flown up from Texas, I think from Dallas, from Chicago. And so I'm like, oh, so you also traveled to run as well. And okay. So, I was just like, I got questions. This is great. And that for me, it's when it happened. That's for me when I'm like, okay, now I'm in this journey. I call like the first 7 states were just kind of the precursor, like the trial and error, but New Jersey was like, oh, okay. And that's when I learned about, there's a difference between races where there are a lot of Black people to, oh, these are like the Black races.
My name is Cindy Burnett, and each week I interview at least 2 traditionally published authors on my podcast, Thoughts from a Page. We talk spoiler-free about their books, so you can listen whether you have read the book or not. And then we delve into things that you most likely won't hear about anywhere else. The importance of the cover design, why they included various aspects of the story, personal details about both the books and the authors' lives, and so much more. You can find the podcast on every major platform and learn more about it on my website, thoughtsfromapage.com. Thanks so much for checking it out.
We call this kind of cultural capital in sociology of like, I was learning kind of the knowledge, the skills, the lingo from, people who look like me of like, this is how this works for us. And so from that moment, it was you general society, kind of the dominant kind of white normative society of you may not see me as a runner because I don't fit that mold, but I totally am. And so, I can learn how to run. There are many groups you can belong to, apps you can get, things you can learn about how do you run. That's fine. But what makes this uniquely special was that as a Black woman in this space, it's different kind of cultural norms that I was learning, different kind of like, this is how you navigate this space. So it's not just running, but it's how to navigate the running space as a Black woman. And that was like, oh, got it. And just kind of getting that lesson. Yeah, it was just great. So from that point on, I knew even though I may be racist in spaces where I may not see people who look like me, other Black women being, if I was in Idaho or Iowa, wherever, but I knew I was a part of the community. I knew we were there, even though, there may be a race that I don't see us, or maybe one of few of us, but I'm part of something bigger. And I think that was the thing of like, oh, this is just great. And, for me, we're all doing it. Well, I think most people are doing it, because it's a sense of strength, sense of accomplishment when you run. And it just makes me happy. But while I was doing this journey, I was, 2015 to, I guess it will be 2023 when I'm done. I know for a fact, subconsciously, I realized that when I go out to run, I try to look like a runner. I didn't realize that. And through my evolution I'm like, oh my gosh, because it's a way to protect me. I want people like, I'm not a threat to you. And especially as I'm running in different states that I don't know, different cities I don't know. This is, in this era of, Black Lives Matter, say her name, kind of Trump era, as I'm running in these spaces, being more mindful of how I'm perceived to others, which is crappy because it just can't be, I just put on a pair of shoes and I just go, right? Like I have to think through these things. And especially I think women in general have to think through these things in terms of safety and thinking about issues of kind of sexism in this space. But there's another layer of, I don't want anyone to sexually assault or harass me, but then I don't want anyone to say racist things to me, or or see me as a threat in that way. So right, so it's this extra level of awareness that I have to be aware of when I go running. I didn't even think about those things, right? So all of this is like, oh wow. What I've noticed is that there is, well, one kind of body shaming, if you will. So there's this ideal body type of what a runner's body should look like. And so I've had comments said to me about my body and while running, so it's not just like everyone's done running or even before the race, but it's like while running, you're going to actually make a comment to me, like, seriously? And so I've had comments to me about my body. So the stereotype of like, especially Black bodies, right? Of like, oh, look, you have such, strong looking muscles, and oh, your back looks really good. I'm like, what are you talking about? Our people will make comments to me about, oh, I bet you're really fast. Like, your calf muscles look like you can run really fast. I'm like, what? Why are you talking to me about my body while I run? So I've had body comments, and then I've had comments made to me about not only being fast, but asking if I had like Kenyan blood in me. So I'll give you an example. I was in Utah and I ran this race, finished it. And, everyone was like, good job. We did this thing. And this guy was kind of hovering around me. He's like, good job. I'm like, thanks. And he's like, you're really fast. I'm like, well, we're all fast. We all finished. Like, great. And he said to me, and I quote, wow, I bet you have some Kenyan blood in you. And I'm looking at him like, what the, but part of me, I had to think quickly and say, okay, I'm in this space. I'm in Utah. There are a lot of white folks around. I'm the only Black person here. So I need to be mindful of what I say. And I just, said to him, well, if you think I run fast, I said, I live in Boston and I, training for a marathon. So I'm just like, ha ha. But he just said it very nonchalantly, thought he was giving me a compliment. And so I've had people, perhaps not intentionally, but, think that they're giving me a compliment, and it's not, or even I was in, Oklahoma and running a race, and I'm there early, and I've got on my bib number. I look like a runner, and I walked into one of the corrals, and one of the race manager people, organizers, said, "Oh, this is for runners. This is like a runner space." And I'm looking at me. I'm like, "Do you not see my? Why don't you think I'm?" And I said, "I'm here to run." And then talking to other Black women, that's my particular focus. We're sharing, unfortunately, like war stories about like, this was said, or that happened. I'm like, and this was all before I think people became more attuned to this, all before Ahmaud Arbery in 2020, of this whole notion of kind of running while Black. And what does it mean, for people to think that you're not a runner, or people, think that you're a threat, or think you don't belong in this space. So this is before all this. This has been happening for years. But again, as I'm new to this space and finding this information, I'm like, oh, and it's no different than outside of the running space, unfortunately. Running is just a microcosm of society. So all the things that we are outside of running, so you think about, our social identities around like race, gender, and class, our like maybe political, social ideologies, that is also happening in the running space as well. Because, the isms, right? The sexism, classism, racism, that also happens in the running space, though maybe not intentional, but it is there. So there's all of these these layers that I find interesting, or even the power of who creates races and where they are and what communities. So one of the races locally here is the Road to Wellness 5K in Roxbury. And I love that race so much because it's in Roxbury, which is a predominantly African American neighborhood. And it's beautiful, it's historic, but there's a stigma to Roxbury being kind of dangerous and all kind of the negative stereotypes. And the fact that there's this 5K there, it brings people, in this neighborhood so the community can see people who look like them who run. I mean, that's huge. And I think people don't think about even, the creation of the races and the neighborhoods that they're in, like what message that sends to the people in the community. One of the things that I'm working with the BAA, who do the Boston Marathon, is that when you see all the banners in the city, Boston proper, like the runners are coming, the marathon's coming, look to see who's on the banner. Number one, look to see who's there, but also number two, they only go in particular parts of the city. So they're not going to, like I say, Roxbury or Mattapan, or even parts of Dorchester where there's more ethnic and racial diversity, right? It's only going in certain parts of the city. So that sends a message. So that invisibleness, I mean, that's part of it. And so those cultural stereotypes just kind of manifest. Whereas, I don't think I can do this, or, this is something, white people do, or is not for me. That adds to it. So it's this whole like systemic thing when we think about running, or even like just health. So if we saying we want a healthier society, a healthier nation, and recreational running is one way to do it in terms of physical activity, then what are we doing to support that, to make sure all people have access? So there's all of these kind of layers, in the running space that I find very fascinating. Running is definitely more than just running. So I think cancer has been a theme, because my mom passed away from cancer. And so my homage to her, really how this started, well, definitely everything's because of my mother, but it's a way for me, of letting her know I'm still here. Because it was like, how do I honor my mother and myself and keep going? Because, when you lose someone, my mother and I were so close, of just like, how do I move forward? I mean, I know I have to move forward, but how do I do it in a way that's productive and not negative? And so it was through this running where I'm like, this is a gift I can give my mother. This is a gift I can give myself. So I always run on like her birthday, our Mother's Day, or her passing day, to just say, this is the gift I can give to you and me. But at the same time, it's allowed me to have a sense of freedom, because this is where I feel, like I said, kind of strong, have a better sense of myself, and just let things go. And so, for me, that's part of my running journey. But it wasn't until in 2020, right? So pandemic, when all of us the world stopped for a lot of us. And I found out that I had stage 0 breast cancer, but still cancer nonetheless. But it was there. They caught it early enough. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I had already run like 40 something states. It was state 46. State 46 was the last state before the pandemic. And my plan was to finish off the rest of the states in 2020. But, that didn't happen. And so I'm like, I don't, kind of like, what do you do now? How do you go forward? I'm like, well, I got to finish this thing. And through my cancer diagnosis, I had a lumpectomy, then they had to do a reincision, and then I had radiation. So I couldn't run for a while, because you have to heal. And I realized that running had become such a part of my identity and who I am, that to not run was just a disruption to me. So that just put things in a different perspective too, of what does it mean if I can't run? And I realized that, I miss it. And I realized even more so how it is a part of me. As I go through this progression of when I started to where I am now, I think from the loss of my mom, of being, I was damaged, right? I was damaged. I was just in such a bad place that starting this journey, I didn't realize that this journey is a it's a lifesaver for me, because I wonder if my friend never asked me to participate in that race, I wonder where I would be. And I know for a fact I would not be in the same spot. And I can like look back now and see how I was kind of like drowning, right? As I reflect back, like I didn't realize how much of depression I was in, how much grief I was in, until I started coming up for air. And that running has kind of let me kind of come up for air a bit, then some. And I'm like, if I didn't run, would I have just drowned? Like, I don't even know. I don't know. But now where I am right now, one more state left, like I just feel stronger, but I'm defining it differently than how I started off. So it's not about, keeping, not being vulnerable, kind of taking care of everyone. It's like, no, I am vulnerable. I, will let people know what I think and how I feel. And it's okay to say no. And I'm tired, I can't do it. Or to say, you know what, I need some help. And just kind of rethinking strength. And I feel more at peace, if that makes any kind of sense, of like, I put myself in uncomfortable positions, like running across the country solo in these crazy times as a Black woman. It's not easy. And I'm always fearful, but there's a difference between having fear to motivate you or having fear cripple you. And so for me, part of the running journey is the making myself uncomfortable, and it's okay. And to kind of work through my fear. Because people always say, you're so brave or you're strong, or I'm like, yeah, but there's fear involved too. And the fear has pushed me to do that. And it may not be perfect and it may be messy, but it's okay. And that I don't have to, sorry, I'm getting choked up, but I don't have to live up to anyone else's standard but mine. So when we talk about like, how do you define a runner or what a runner looks like my version of running is running, and it's okay. And if it makes people uncomfortable or unhappy, not my issue. Right. So that's where I am now. We're kind of giving no F's to give. Like I've carved out my space and I'm happy with it.
Tiffany has defined her own space in the running community, and she's also working to help other women do the same. She is the co-ambassador for the Boston chapter of Black Girls Run, and she is also a member of the Boston Running Collaborative, which the Boston Athletic Association created to sort of strengthen its focus on increasing diversity and access to the running community here in the Boston area. Tiffany also recently modeled for REI and was featured in their catalog. And as part of that, there was an accompanying article that featured her that was titled What a Runner Looks Like. And very excitingly, Tiffany is writing a book about her experiences running a half marathon in all 50 states. And of course, she's doing that through that dual lens of being a Black woman runner herself, and also as a sociologist who is focused on that intersection of race, gender, and class. So I will keep you up to date on when that will be published and how you can get a hold of it when it comes out. In the meantime, though, you can read Tiffany's blog. She is at cirun50.com, and that's 50, the numbers. And she shares a lot about her running journey there. And I want to thank Tiffany for sharing her story, and especially for being open to talking about her grieving process and her cancer journey. These are really personal stories, and I recognize that sharing them in public isn't always the most comfortable thing for people to do. But I also know that they resonate with people, and Tiffany is certainly not alone. So the hope, of course, is that these stories resonate with other people and let them know that they're not alone and that they can get through these tough challenges. So thank you so much, Tiffany. And I also want to add that I have been wanting to have Tiffany on the show for a long time. I've had a chance to meet her in person. I've been following her story, and she just has the greatest smile. She is always such a joy to be around, and I'm just so thankful that she's part of the running community and for all the work that she's doing. And of course, look to the show notes to find links on how to keep up with Tiffany, including a link to her Instagram account. There in the notes, you will also find ways to keep up with us on social media. We are on Twitter at Women Run Stories. We're also on Instagram at Women's Running Stories. And we're on Facebook. Please join us. I encourage you to leave comments. I always love hearing from listeners. And thank you for being here. I say it every single episode because it's true. I really do love making these episodes, but the power of them comes from you listening. So thanks for being here. I would also really appreciate if you shared the show with friends and family who you think would enjoy these stories. That is how independent shows like ours grow, and I would really love for our show to get bigger. On the note of that, I am very excited to say that we are joining a network. Together with Hear Her Sports and Keeping Track, which are two other women-led sports shows that focus on women athletes, we are joining the network Evergreen, and we're just so excited. They're excited to help promote women's sports media, and we're all excited to work together and grow. And of course, I do not create this show by myself. Like I mentioned up top, Cormac O'Regan does all the original music, and he does all the scoring for the show, and he comes to you from Cork, Ireland. April Mariner does all the design work for the show, the website, the merch, the graphics on Instagram. She does it all. And she comes to you from a very snowy Truckee, California. You can find April at bonfirecollaborative.com. And yes, I am Cherie Louise Turner. I'm your host and producer. I'm coming to you from my closet studio in Somerville, Massachusetts. And until next time, we all wish you joyful, healthy strides forward. Women's running. Women's running stories.
My name is Cindy Burnett, and each week I interview at least two traditionally published authors on my podcast, Thoughts from a Page. We talk spoiler-free about their books, so you can listen whether you have read the book or not. And then we delve into things that you most likely won't hear about anywhere else. The importance of the cover design, why they included various aspects of the story, personal details about both the books and the authors' lives, and so much more. You can find the podcast on every major platform and learn more about it on my website, thoughtsfromapage.com. Thanks so much for checking it out.